Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about how to compare fractions. Now, getting into this video, you do have to have some basic knowledge of fractions, which we already covered in previous videos. Things like what number is the numerator and what number is the denominator. You also need to have a little bit of a basic understanding of what the whole is and how big the whole of your fraction is when you're trying to compare them. So you can see on my main screen here I do have fractions set up. Talking about the fraction 7/8, comparing that to the fraction 3/8, and in this case 7/8 is bigger than 3/8. So you'll see a few examples as we get into it, and you'll see some strategies for how to compare fractions. So let's take a look at one of them. First one I'm going to give you is a fraction where the numerators are going to be equal. So we'll look at a fraction where we're comparing 2/3, and we're comparing that to the fraction 2/5. Now you can see in both of my fractions the numerator is 2. In one the denominator is 3 and the other one's a 5. So I'm going to draw these fractions so that you can see what they look like with a fraction bar. We'll draw 2/3 over here, and I am going to use a fraction bar. Now previous learning taught us that the denominator tells us how many equal pieces there are, so this fraction is going to be split into thirds. Over here on the right side, I'm going to use the same size whole, and that's what's important. Making sure that my whole shape is equal and that I'm starting with the same amount. However, over on the right side, you can see my denominator is a 5. That means I need 5 equal pieces. And there are my 5 equal pieces. Well, over on the left side, we have a numerator of 2. That means 2/3 would be filled in. Here's 1/3. Here's 2/3 filled in. And over here on the right side, I have a numerator of 2, which means 2/5 are filled in. Here's 1/5, and here's 2/5. If you look at these two fractions, the part that's filled in on the left would be bigger than the part that's filled in on the right. That tells me that the fraction 2/3 is indeed greater than the fraction 2/5. So as you notice, and you'll notice through these, when the numerator is the same, a trend that will happen is as the denominator, in this case a 5, gets bigger, the fraction actually gets smaller. And the reason for that is these fifths in this fraction are pretty small pieces. If you only have 2 small pieces, comparing to the 2/3 over here, which are larger pieces, the larger pieces obviously are going to be bigger. Now let's look at one that's a little bit different. This time we'll look at a fraction where you have the same denominator. So this time we'll go with 2/7 on the left, and we'll go with 6/7 on the right. Now in this case, you may notice that we have the same denominator. Both of these pieces of our fractions here are going to be broken up into 7 equal pieces. So over on the left, we're going to draw a fraction bar and try to sketch this out the best we can. We need 7 equal pieces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 equal pieces. Over on the right side, we need to have that same thing. So we're going to draw the same size fraction bar because we want the whole to be the same thing. And we need to split this into 7 equal pieces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, just like last time, I'm going to fill in what it tells me here. My denominator is a 7, so we know we have 7 equal pieces on both sides. But looking at the numerators, and maybe you're able to start making predictions here, on my left fraction, I only have 2/7 filled in. So here's 1/7, and here's 2/7 filled in. Over on the right side, I have 6/7 filled in. So here's 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, 4/7, 5/7, and 6/7. Just like last time, if we now compare the pieces that are filled in, that's what 2/7 looks like in the green box. And over here on the right, here's 6/7 in the green box. Well, looking at this one, you could clearly see that 2/7 is in fact less than 6/7. So you'll notice something when you have the same denominator. when you have the same denominator, in this case we have 7s on both sides, 7 here and 7 here, as the numerator gets bigger, the fraction gets bigger. And the reasoning for that is, if you have the same size pieces in both, and we do, we have 7s, well, these 6 7s over here are going to be bigger than the 2 7s on this side, on the left side. Okay? Let's look at one more example. In this case, we're going to have 1/3, and we're going to compare that with 3/3. Now, you may already notice that we have the same denominator on both sides, so we're talking about thirds. That means if we drew these fraction bars out quickly, and maybe you don't need to because you might be paying attention to the rule here, same size whole on both sides, thirds for both. Over on the left side, we have 1/3 filled in. Over on the right side, we have 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And yeah, you may realize that is the same thing as 1 whole, right? This fraction 3/3 does in fact equal 1 whole. And if you're comparing the fractions, 1/3 over on the left is certainly less than 3/3 or a whole. Same thing, same denominator, thirds on both sides. As the numerator gets bigger, the fraction gets bigger. One final one. We'll go with 2/6, and we'll compare that to 4/6. You could pause the video when I'm done talking, try to figure this one out. Which one of these fractions would be greater? Which one would be less? Do notice that we have the same denominator. We're comparing 2/6 and 4/6. Sketch out a picture. Just make sure your whole is the same size. So if you're going to use a fraction bar or circles, and try to figure out, is 2/6 less than 4/6 or is 2/6 greater than 4/6? Pause the video. Go ahead and try to work yours out on paper, and I'll show you the answer in a second. Okay, you had a chance to pause the video. By now, you should have probably figured out that 2/6 is less than 4/6. We said that when you have the same denominator, as the numerator gets bigger, the fraction gets bigger. If you need to sketch those out in fraction bars, you can do that. But over on this side, 2 out of 6 pieces, since the 6 are the same size, 2 out of 6 on the left is going to be less than 4 out of 6 on the right. Keep this video in mind if you need to watch it again as you guys are completing your page today. That would be great. And anytime you need access to it, you know where to find it.